News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. There's your closing bell for this Thursday on Wall Street, where markets were jolted by concerns over credit quality in a couple of regional banks. And that speaks to the fragility of the bull market. And of course, we bring you the closing numbers each day here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 lost 42 points. NASDAQ down 107 points. The Dow down 301 points. The 10-year Treasury yield at 3.97%. The 2-year yield at 3.42%. Apple shares fell about 1% in the regular session after it announced it will launch a touch-screen version of its Mac computer, reversing course on a stance that dates back to co-founder Steve Jobs. Sources say the company is readying a revamped MacBook Pro with a touch display for late 2026 or early 2027. The rest of the computer industry embraced touchscreen laptops more than 10 years ago. United Airlines stock fell about 5% in regular trading after CEO Scott Kirby's bullish predictions about profitability ran into investor concerns about operating challenges and economic uncertainty. President Trump says he will be meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest to discuss an end to the war in Ukraine. Trump says great progress was made after his more than 2-hour-long phone conversation with Putin today. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt spoke outside the White House.
They also agreed to have a high-level senior staff meeting convene as early as next week, which will then be followed by a meeting very likely between President Trump and President Putin as well. They talked about Budapest as being a location for that.
And in response, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban posted on X, quote, "We're ready." Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to meet with President Trump at the White House tomorrow. President Trump is threatening Hamas with reprisals if the group continues killings inside Gaza, opening the door for direct U.S. military action in Gaza. The developments point to a fragile nature of the truce between Israel and Hamas. President Trump has announced steps to make in vitro fertilization more widely available in the U.S.
After extensive negotiations, EMD Serrano, the largest fertility drug manufacturer in the world, has agreed to provide massive discounts to all fertility drugs. EMD Serrano will list their fertility drugs online at trumprx.gov at very, very heavily reduced prices.
And EMD Serrano posted on its website that it has also entered an agreement with the Trump administration that excludes its pharmaceutical products from tariffs. Trump also struck deals with Pfizer and AstraZeneca to delay threatened tariffs on their medicines in exchange for charging the same in the U.S. as they do abroad. The budget deficit declined slightly for the 2025 fiscal year as tariff revenue hit a record high, although the pace of borrowing also remains historically elevated at a time of economic expansion. The Treasury Department says the deficit for the fiscal year was down about 2%. That's about what the Congressional Budget Office estimated last week. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said the U.S. could take in as much as $500 billion each year in tariff revenue. Tensions with China have Fed Governor Stephen Miron making a case for a half-point rate cut when the central bank meets at the end of this month. But fellow Governor Christopher Waller says a quarter point makes more sense to address a labor market that's getting weaker while the economy is still growing.
For the last 40 years, demand has outstripped supply. And what does that mean? Prices go up, yields go down. At some point, if that reverses and the supply starts exceeding demand, the only way you're going to get the markets in the world to hold this stuff is you lower the price, which means the yield's going to go up. So for me, having good, stable fiscal policy is the best way to ensure that you don't have that happen.
Fed Governor Chris Waller spoke with Bloomberg's Tom Keene at a Council on Foreign Relations event in New York. You can hear more from Fed Governor Waller on the Bloomberg Talks podcast. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, in condemning China's decision to step up curbs on its exports of rare earth metals, says it's possible the U.S. can move to hold more stakes in mining companies to obtain rare earths without having to go through China.
I think the Chinese actions have really galvanized not only the government, but even private industry in the United States. So, the U.S., both private and public, I think is on their way to really diversifying and de-risking from that leverage situation.
U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer tells Fox Business that China is acting as if it wants to decouple from the U.S. and the rest of the world when it comes comes to trade. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva urged countries to be calm as they navigate U.S. tariffs and a changing trade environment.
If these recipients of Chinese goods feel the heat and decide that they too should impose tariffs, we may still have the risk of a trade war. So our message to everybody is be calm.
And the message for China, be careful to not provoke other countries so they won't see China as a threat to their economies. Georgieva spoke with Bloomberg's Lisa Abramowitz on the sidelines of the IMF and World Bank meetings in Washington. Day 16 of the government shutdown and neither side is budging. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says the Democrats have been clear.
We're not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that guts the health care of the American people. This is a major issue for millions of Americans all across the country.
Jeffries says it needs urgent action now, but House Speaker Mike Johnson says the GOP was always planning to continue the debate and discussion about health care. He says the government must reopen first. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.